Bro, I wish I could beatbox. How's it going, guys? Preston Clark here. I hope you've all been having a great weekend. It's been the weekend here for me. If it's not the weekend for you, I'm sorry. I hope you had a good one anyways. Today, I want to talk about terastalizing. There's been a lot of debate going on in the community recently about terastalizing, and for a good reason. It's a new mechanic, and let's be completely honest, Dynamax didn't exactly treat us the way we were hoping to be treated when it came to a battle mechanic, especially for us hardened, hardcore, deep down battlers in the VGC community. There's been a lot of back and forth going on with the mechanic, specifically towards the type changing. There hasn't been really anything being talked about the power that you're gonna get with terastalizing. And I think that this mechanic is actually like really, three-dimensional. I think it has a lot of ways that you can use it, and a lot of things that in my opinion, make it a better mechanic than Dynamax at the very least. So I kind of want to go over the pros and cons, kind of look at it from both angles, and kind of give my opinion on why I am actually really looking forward to the new mechanic with terastalizing, and why I feel a lot more comfortable with this mechanic. So first, let's go over what we know about terastalizing. So we know that any Pokemon can terastalize into any of the 18 types. We know that you can do the raids to get a certain type for a terrestrial type. Say like in the trailer they show that you could go get a Gardevoir that has a water Terra type. That way that you can kind of really get what you want with these Pokemon, so you can cover potential weaknesses. Tyranitar being, I think, the most common example right now of turning into a ghost type to help stay off the close combats. And we also know that you can only terastalize, use your Terra power once a battle. So you can't just change types from all 6 of your Pokemon. You can only do it once, much like a Z-move or Dynamax or a Mega Evolution. You only get one Pokemon that can do it, and then that type will stay for the entire battle. So if you change your Gardevoir into a water type, it'll be a water type for the rest of the time. Something else that we know about Terra types is that if you change into a type that your Pokemon currently is, for example, Golduck into a water type, a water terastalize, that it'll boost their water type attacks and give them more power. So this has a really good defensive and offensive use to it. You can use it either to boost your attacks and be more offensive with it, or you can use it to kind of surprise your opponent by switching into defensive type changes. And the last thing that we know that they've pretty much confirmed is that you will not be able to know what Terra type your opponent has on their Pokemon until they use it. They talk about the surprise factor and using it to get a leg up on your opponent and surprise them with a different type. And so we will not, almost 100%, I'm convinced we will 100% not know what Terra types our opponent has unless they use that Terra type. So now that we've kind of gone over what we do know about terastalizing, I kind of want to talk about it in an offensive sense and a defensive sense, because I really think that this mechanic can help cater to both sides of the players. The offensive players and the defensive players can use this, and whoever uses it better, in my opinion, I think whoever uses their terastalizing better will probably win that battle. So offense. With terastalizing, like we talked about before, it'll boost up your attack power of a move that you have if your Pokemon is already that type. So you change Arcanine to a fire terastalize and boost up its flare blitzes, Golduck to boost up its hydro pumps, and Tyranitar to boost up its rock types. This is something that can really help you break through an opponent's bulky wall Pokemon, something that could give you trouble. And you could really need to try to make sure to clear that from the field as fast as possible. You can use terastalizing to break through those Pokemon, and this is where I think it's the most similar to Z-moves. Z-moves were all about having one really strong big attack to try to clear a threat from your opponent's side of the field. And so I would use that with my Golduck to Hydro Vortex and try to really weaken and hopefully OHKO something like a Mandibuzz that was sitting in my way, snarling my team and setting up tailwinds. I just needed it off the field. So I think if you're going to use terastalizing in this way, I honestly think it'll be very effective. I think honestly most people will probably use it this way. I think they'll mostly use it to boost their own attacks, to make sure you can get one-hit KOs on things that are vital to you winning the battle. And I think it's going to be very effective in doing that. And the fact that it just stays on the field, so as long as your Pokemon is not knocked out, you will be able to fire off these boosted moves, really making it so that if you can just really catch a good switch in and punish a defensive play, or even do a surprise offensive play, you will be able to really get the leg up on your opponent in the offensive game. Defense. We all know the defensive implications of being able to change types. I think the reason that has been such a hot topic on Twitter with the type changes is that I think people are the most afraid of the defensive implications that you can do with these surprise type changes. Not knowing what your type your opponent is, and not knowing, kind of having to guess when they might change and having to guess what type it is, could really kind of throw you off. It puts a lot of things up in the air. Like, we think that Tyranitar might change into a ghost type, but what if it changes into a ground type? What if it changes into, a flying type, blah, 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 blah. There's all these things that Tyranitar can use, or any Pokemon can use, to change it to a type that might cover a weakness on the team. And I think especially in Best of 1 that this is going to be the most volatile. Best of 1 just is inherently volatile and random because people try to use cheesy tricks and try to have some sort of trick to use to win the battle. And I mean, that's Best of 1. What are you going to do, guys? You can't just not admit to yourselves that Best of 1, no matter what the mechanic is, kind of really sucks. Like a lot. But in a Best of 3, I think this defensive mechanic will, one, be a lot more manageable. Once again, I don't think people will really be changing their types all that often unless they're really in a sticky situation. I think more often than not, they're going to use it as an offensive mechanic. But if you're really stuck in a situation when you're like, I just cannot switch, I can't do anything, I already burned Protect, and I don't think Double Protect is the best. But I do have my tricky Terra type in my back pocket that I can use to try to get this battle back into my favor, to get an immunity from one of my opponent's attacks, and then attack back and do some big damage and maybe even get a KO. So I think the defensive implications will mostly be used when opponents are in a bad spot, or when it's closer to an end game. I could see a lot of end game situations where you terastalize into a type that will help you win the end game. For example, like a Tapu Fini versus a Kartana. Tapu Fini changes into a fire type, and your opponent has already used their Terra power. So then you can use your Tapu Fini that's fire and just take whatever attack Kartana has and win the end game that way. I could see it being mostly used that way. I definitely don't see anybody changing types turn 1 of a battle. I just feel like if you're using it in a defensive way and you're using it on turn 1 or turn 2, unless you really led really poorly, I just don't see it being used like that. I don't see, and if you do use it, I honestly feel like that is I don't want to say bad, but a bad way to use that mechanic defensively. I just don't think it'll be something that we're going to see. Overall, I think the mechanic is very balanced for offensive, defense, and defensive play. I think any player that plays with any of these play styles can really mix and match with how they use this mechanic. And I think the mechanic won't be nearly as random as we're thinking once a metagame starts to develop. Even with Dynamax, any Pokemon could Dynamax. Any Pokemon, has a variety of moves they can use. We had Max Airstream on some of the most random Pokemon I've ever seen. But we always had our go-to Dynamaxes, and you could always kind of tell when your opponent was potentially going to Dynamax and what Pokemon on their team were going to Dynamax. We had Thundurus that always led to Dynamax, Venusaur that always led to Dynamax, Charizard, Blastoise, Groudon, Kyogre. Like, we would look at our opponent's team, we knew the metagame, and we already had a good idea about what Pokemon that they were going to try to Dynamax. And I think with Terra Power, it's going to be very similar. in the beginning, it's going to be everyone's just using the most random type. Some, you know, there are going to be people that try to be sneaky and try to use some weird typing on their Pokemon to help do something weird, and it's going to happen. And with anything, it's going to happen. But I think once a metagame actually develops, once good teams start to be formed, once tournaments start to come back and people start to win things, the metagame is going to be so, to me, I feel like it's going to be very normal. I feel like we're going to have a good idea of what the best Terra types are going to be, who are the best terastalizers on each team, who's the most powerful to use it offensively, what the best defensive types for each Pokemon. And I really think we're going to figure it out, guys. I really don't think we have to worry about it. If we could make it through Dynamax, and if there are people that did well with Dynamax and people that for some reason even liked Dynamax, this mechanic I think is going to be so much better. It's to me the closest we've been to just kind of normal Pokemon in a long time, where you can just actually play the game, go for board position, and you can make a couple mistakes and still work your way back into the battle because the power scale will be a lot lower. So guys, let's just all take a breath. Let's just all just know that eventually this is going to even out. It's going to kind of flatline a little bit. We're going to know who the best terastalizers are. We're going to know who the best ones that use it defensively and the best ones that use it offensively. And I think this mechanic is just going to be a lot better than we're worried about right now. You know, each Pokemon can only have one Terra type at a time, and you can only do it once per battle, which means if your opponent uses a bad one or has a bad Terra type on their Pokemon, then that Terra type's not going to do them any good. If they're ground type Tyranitar, they can change it to a ground type and take a neutral close combat, but they're not going to be able to OHKO you back. They're not going to be able to take no damage. And that's just going to come down to how the meta develops. So I think let's just kind of take some optimism and just know that we made it through Dynamax. It can't be worse than that. And as a community, we'll get a good meta going. We'll get some great teams going. We'll have some good tournaments. So I really think this mechanic is going to be a lot better. And I think it's really balanced, in my opinion. Coming from an offensive player who can kind of see both sides of how to use this mechanic, I'm a lot more comfortable with it. And I think that it's going to be totally fine. So that's it, guys. That is my thoughts on terastalizing offensively and defensively. I'm actually really looking forward to Scarlet and Violet to use this mechanic. The mechanic seems very fun to me, seems very balanced to me, and it's something that I'm a lot more comfortable with personally. I feel like there's going to be a lot more room for good pivot switching and good type changing, and I'm really looking forward to this, and I feel like this could be a format that's very similar to 2017 and 2018, which were some of the most fun formats that I ever played in VGC. And so I'm really looking forward to this, and I just know that it's going to be a really good time. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope that you are looking forward to Scarlet and Violet as well, and we will see you in the next video.